discuss world affairs.
Where'd you park this time?
He was in my way tonight.
Actually, yeah. Public Works must be working because there's not 8 cars down there. Normally you can't find a place.
Ready?
The funny thing is I took yours one time. That wasn't bad. But I came in the morning and the only thing I could find was Kwiatkowski's. He laid square egg. He's jumping up and down. Nolan says that's Brzezinski's car. I don't care whose car it is. He's going on.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the police and fire budget session. 2 definitely needed community services that are provided by Erie, Pennsylvania, and cannot be compared to any other township around us because we are a large city and we take care immediately the concerns that we have. So police and fire are needed in Erie, Pennsylvania. I welcome all of you today. I don't want to leave anyone out. I don't know who's online. Is the mayor online?
He is.
Hi, Mayor Joe. I welcome our 2 upcoming council people in today's audience who are Mo Troop and Chuck Nelson, and Fire Chief Joe and Len Trott, second in command, is here today with Paul Lichtenwater. And Paul, do you need to start anything off?
No, I'll get going. And I told you I was going to bring a joke for the night, but it's more of a picture joke. And we got this, Christine.
He took it off already.
Christine took it off already. We kind of thought it was funny. The face you make when a county asked what that expense was for. So, a little levity to start the evening off. Okay, in your handout page, there's only a couple departments we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the Office of Fire, which is in the budget book on page 45, and in the expenditure manual on page 23. So going through there, and I'll go through the numbers real quick, and then you can ask Joe questions about operations and everything he's got going on. 23 in expenditure and 45 in the budget book. No new FTEs, same complement that they had last year, they will have in the upcoming year. And the expenditure items, there's an increase in operating expenses due to supplies and repair and maintenance. And I'll go through that real quick again and then turn it over to Joe. So you're going to look at office supplies, basically the same thing as last year. Operating supplies, just a hair up. Some of the things that they need for the different firehouses, just increase in expenses. Repair and maintenance, there's about a $40,000 increase in repair and maintenance. And I think we're going to listen to the chief and talk for a couple of minutes maybe about, they have a very aging fleet. So we've spent a lot of money in the last year on truck repairs, consumables, education and training, communications, those things are all about the same thing. Heat, light, and power, your utilities in the various firehouses, right about the same thing. And the repair and maintenance services, since we've done a lot of the work in-house, the services are your outside services that we contract with. So basically the budget last year, we budgeted 27 million and 27 and a half, and this year it's about 27 million. The big decrease is, as you know, we talked about earlier, the pension contribution that needs to be made for the fire pension plan went down this year by about $1.1 million, and that was due to the change again in the actuarial assumptions and all the things that make up the actuarial assumptions. So that was, yes. Yes.
On the pension contribution year to date, so is that like something where though you make a big payment at the
Yes,
end of the year?
correct. Okay. We this year we paid the police and fire couple $1 million each back in June or July. And then we just made their final contribution in October. What happens is, or November, beginning of the month, what happens is, due to us getting the state aid from the state aid pension from Harrisburg, we have to pay that bill within 60 days of receiving that money. So we get that money the middle of September or so, and we always make that final payment once we get the state aid check, the beginning of November. And I'm not going to tell you exactly what date it was, but council did approve it on the list of bills. So it was in the last 2 checks. I really have nothing more about the numbers. I know there's 79 pages of their spending in the last 5 years, and you approved the list of bills, so everybody pretty much knows what the chief is spending this money on. So I'm
How
going
many
to turn
firemen
it,
do we have right now?
pardon me?
How many, what's our
Oh,
force?
well, then I'm going to turn it over to him.
You know the answer?
I'm done. I do know the answer, but we'll let him talk about that.
Ask him.
We have 137. And when I started in 1980, we had 258
I don't know.
doing the same job with less.
With less.
258?
Yep.
And now you only have 137?
How many stores closed?
You know, I couldn't, a lot,
Yeah.
I mean,
On the plus side, how much money and grants have you guys brought in? It's kind of impressive.
Right.
Making you jump all over the place, I'm sorry, but I was very impressed when I heard that.
$1.8 million. That's in the last 4 years.
Fantastic.
We've got 100,000 in process right now in applications that we're filling out.
one of our proudest grants is the smoke detector grants that we got for the people of the city.
The GIS system's not too bad either.
So are you going to do a
Our grant
presentation, or
writer's
do
done
you
a
want
great
us to
job.
ask questions already? Or are you doing a presentation? I wasn't sure.
Well, I mean, the big subject is our fire trucks. We're really suffering. The paper we passed you out, you'll see 3 vehicles with the letter T. Those are the trucks. And we're operating a 2003, a 1999, and a 1991. Now, I don't know how many people are driving cars that old that are sitting around this table, but I'm not. Mr. Wodnarski, really? Well, then, there goes my argument.
Like a child,
Thank you.
You don't give them up.
Right.
But anyway, no,
Sure. Oh, that's okay. But, and the problem is, we're looking at a truck, and we're looking at a cost of right now at $1.7 million. And I know it's a big hit. And our other ask is to get a engine or a pumper, the ones that put the water out in the fire. We're looking at least $750,000 there. And with prices have already gone up since it takes a year to spec one out. We've got 2 of them shovel ready right now. And back pre-COVID, we could get that rig back from the company manufacturer in about a year. Now we're looking at 2 years, and the prices are continually going up. The longer we wait, and I've got to say, we have a 3-man mechanic crew at Marsh Street, and we'll talk about Marsh Street later. They're doing a fantastic job. Truly, they're keeping these rigs on the road. And I'm very proud of those 3 men. And it saved the city a lot of money. So the older engines, the frame rails were rusting out, and they caught it just in time that we could send them back to the manufacturer. And we got those replaced at no charge. So how much was that a unit, Lenny?
About 60,000 each that we saved.
That was what, 3 or 4?
4.
4. So that's even better than a grant.
Yes, it is.
You don't know matching funds.
Keep them coming.
But we seriously have to look at a ladder company and an engine company. And if we can get those 2 within the next, well, if we can order them as soon as we can, we can start our 5-year plan looking down the road. And hopefully our suggestion to council would be a line item budget. The money is deposited in that account every year and not borrow for something else at the end of the budget year. And, you know, that way we could lease to buy. And that's probably, you know, the most economic and feasible way for the city to afford fire trucks. But we've kicked this can, ladies and gentlemen, down the road for so long, it's caught up to us. And it's nobody's fault, but the day of reckoning is soon. I mean, not only are they old and rusting, but to get parts like for the motherboards, for the computers, for the motherboards to run the pump systems and all those diodes, they're not making these parts anymore. So, you know, we have to really search around sometimes to get parts that keep these ladders on the road as well as the pumpers. But right, go ahead, Liz. I know.
Well, I have a question. It might be more for Paul or for both of you, but you mentioned, you know, a separate line item for this. And in the TFM report, it was identified that we really don't have a capital budget or not a lot of money in it, right? So would we have a separate capital budget line item for fire, or don't we have other capital needs? And the reason I'm mentioning this is because you may not want to make the analogy, but we know that we have the same problem with the stormwater system. We don't have money set aside in a capital budget to do what has to be done. And I would think that would be something that we would probably see across many departments. You know, you talked about kicking the can down the road. We've kicked a lot of cans. I'm not personally taking responsibility for all the kicking because I've only been on here for, you know, this going into my, I'm wrapping up my first 4 years. But Paul, can you talk about the capital budget and where would these needs be? Would there be a separate capital budget for fire, or do we have a need for a bigger capital budget?
We have a need for a bigger capital budget. As you know, we get the 5 or 6, depending on how the water reserve fund works. We get about $500,000 or $600,000 a year that we spend for capital needs, be there 3 or 4 police cars, public works vehicles. Chief may need some utility vehicles. And we had, you know, last year we had to fix up one of the elevators, was $100,000. So it sounds like a lot of money, $500,000 to $600,000, but every year we scramble to make sure we have the availability to do everything we need to do just in a just in time or a pay-go setting. What the chief's talking about, he did mention long-term leasing, and we've talked to a couple of the banks about long-term leasing. One of the fire companies that sells trucks has leasing programs. But again, that will all need to be budgeted, and it will all need to be, you know, looked at. I don't want to use the word holistic, but in an overall way, because it's not just the chief. You're going to hear Chief Spizzarni talk in a few minutes about his needs. Public Works has needs. So it's a larger thing, and it's a lot more money than we have at this moment in time.
But it isn't in this budget right now. The equipment you're hoping to
No.
get is not in here, correct? Okay.
So I just want to,
ARP money with this, chief?
pardon?
ARP money?
ARP.
ARP money?
I don't know if you can use ARP money to finance fire apparatus.
I would say.
That's what I was thinking.
But you know, to get a good 5-year program running, we have to jumpstart it. We do need this ladder and this pumper. Then we'll be golden for 5 years if we can like get a line item in the capital budget or something. You know, just sold enough money away. So when we need another rig, we'll have money in that budget to lease. You know, and then we'll just be turning over every 5 years. I mean, it's getting hard. If you look at the numbers, 93, our oldest pumper is a 1971 pumper. I mean, that was in service
Those
before.
are just backups or?
Yeah,
They're backups, right?
Jimmy, page 29 of the budget handout book has pictures of all the trucks and somebody did. Yes, in that one.
Yes,
A lot of books.
a lot of books.
And it shows that, as the chief said, the years along with the miles on those things.
Chief Joe, so you're asking for $1.7 million for the ladder truck, is that it?
Yes, ma'am.
And then 750,000 for the engine company?
Our latest quote, Lenny,
There's,
price increase, COVID price increase, get ready.
it's 787 for the pumper and 1.727 for the ladder.
So they, since,
Prices are doing nothing but going up. They'll go up soon after the first of the year, they'll go up again.
and all manufacturers of fire trucks, all companies are doing this, you know, it isn't just, you know,
Supply chain issues, cost of materials.
if you can get the materials.
The ladder's the larger one.
1.727.
It was 778,
787.
87.
Renee, do you know if we can spend ARP money on fire safety vehicles? Thank you.
Pardon?
I wonder if maybe not ARP, but I wonder if fire equipment would be considered infrastructure. I mean, those rules haven't come out yet, so that just was signed, but
Yeah, the final rules for the ARP are not out yet. So the one thing, Renee, we can spend the money, the revenue replacement money on this. So there is, we have about $8 million that we are figuring based on the calculations that the federal government has put out for us over the next 3 or 4 years, that we're going to use what's called revenue replacement. And the early indicators were that we're going to have to spend that money on, I hate to use the word things as an accountant, but it may be capital, it may be supplies, it may be anything. But again, since the final ruling's not out, the revenue replacement may be a place where this could fall in. Again, the revenue replacement, I talk about this all the time. The revenue replacement is supposed to replace what we have in our fund balance, but in case of dire need, we can always do without as much money as we should have. And I always talk about 16% of our annual budget should be in fund balance, but we've made do with what we have.
Which is about what percentage?
Maybe 10, 11, 12%. That's one of the handouts in the book too on page 4, 5, 6, somewhere around there. It's very important.
Let the chief continue.
Okay, sorry, Joe.
No, that's fine. No, I mean, those are the big ticket items we're looking at. And City of Erie does have a dive team. And for you that can remember, we're using a 1987, 1970? 1978 Ftes bread truck as our dive truck. You're well aware of all the volunteer departments with manpower shortages and everything else. We're the only dive team now from Erie West. Erie East, we have one in Northeast, and that's it. And we need to have a presence on the water with the dive team. I mean, we've granted, we've made some body recoveries and everything else. We have a good working relationship with the volunteer department that has the boat. So we don't have to spend money on a boat right now. We do have one, but it's a lot cheaper to use mutual aid and have them help us out like we would help them out. But, we're also going to be looking like at 85,000 for a dive vehicle. That's another can we've been kicking down the road. But it's important, but not as important. The lead, ladies and gentlemen, is that ladder and that pumper. We can't hesitate. I can't stress that enough. The stuff is getting old and worn. It's getting tired. And we got to give these men and women the best equipment we can to serve the citizens of the city.
Chief, what would happen with these older vehicles? Is there any value to them? Just to say we were to sell them for, and I'll just throw a number out, $50,000, or are they just
Probably scrap value, to be honest with you, right, Lenny? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, but the only thing I can remember is some of them have sold at the city auction when the city decides to have an auction, but they probably don't bring any more than scrap value.
and it's nothing you would keep in the fleet as a emergency backup, considering they're just really that old?
Jim, we sold one 10 years ago, maybe it was, I was here, so it's been in the last 15 years, $8,000. It was,
Okay,
Yeah.
it was
Just
not,
throwing-
no,
Yeah.
50, it was not 50, it was 6 or 8,000, it was nothing. Not nothing, but
Another
when,
reason I
when you have
threw 50 out,
to,
just,
yeah,
you
when
know,
your
we're
replacement
looking at
value is
$1 million.
$750,000 and your trade-in value is under $10,000.
That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, the oldest two are really our reserve apparatus, but we just had to invest how much in the suspension of the one?
No, that was $18,000 in the suspension.
Yeah, you guys voted on it last meeting, but it's just getting old. We can't keep it together much longer.
To put it in reserve and keep up with the maintenance on it is,
You're might as well use it.
right, it's not worth it. They're,
Okay.
if you look at the age of some of them, it's not worth keeping.
I'm going to go back to an oldie but goodie question, actually two questions. One is, I know we've asked previously about getting reimbursed by insurance companies because you respond to accidents. Is that happening?
We're this close. We're this
Okay.
close.
And then, so the second question is then related to equipment. It wasn't me, but I know that, people have editorialized in the past about why do we send out the big rigs? Wouldn't it long-term save some wear and tear if you guys do a great job as the first responders? I've seen it. Would there be any sense in looking for smaller equipment for those calls? I don't know how much, do you know how much wear and tear there is on the vehicles from being the first responders and the
Right.
emergency responders?
I
And
understand.
again, that's not a criticism at
Oh,
all,
I
but I
know, I
know
know.
people have talked about it. So I kind of think that they're kind of go together because you are the ones out there responding. So tell us a little bit more about the insurance and what the potential is to get that revenue, and then maybe like the equipment kind of question.
Well, when it comes to first responding, we can't collect any fees because we're not a transporting agency. Emergent care is. We're just a quick response service. And Ms. Ellen, I understand your question. To go to an ambulance or maybe a pickup truck with 4 firefighters and ambulance gear on it is a good idea. It sure would save on the rigs, but we're so short-staffed with fire apparatus and people on the job. If they get a call, they have to turn around, come back and pick up their fire truck. Most cities, Arizona, for example, Phoenix, and a lot of fire-based EMS, all first respond with their fire trucks because when they're done there, they could fall right out and get called out to a fire. I mean, I know wear-wise or economically wise, to operate a fire truck as a, first responding unit is not the smartest thing, but, you look across the country, we're doing what everybody else is doing. And just, just to save someone's life, we get there as quick as we can. And, from there, we could be at a fire, we could be at a water rescue. And we'd have the equipment right there instead of having to go back to the firehouse and pick up a fire truck.
So that, in other words, I guess to answer your question is, the reason you're sending them because just in case while you're there, you have the manpower and the equipment to move to a next potential emergency.
Right. You've got to realize we have 5 pumpers, the ones that put the water on the fires, 1 ladder. At a normal structure fire, no fire is normal, you would utilize 3 pumpers and 1 ladder, minimal. That leaves you 2 pumpers left. Usually, if it gets any bigger, you call another team in, and the one place we kind of sacrifice a little is you have a RIT team, a rapid intervention team. I'd call them the cavalry. Those 4 firefighters stand out in front of that building. And if any of those firefighters inside that building get in trouble, that's their only job, is search and rescue for that firefighter. And we don't do that all the time. And the reason our overtime costs are up is because when we were cut back before, if you have 4 pumpers and a ladder at a fire, you've got 1 pumper left. That isn't enough to cover the city. We have at least 2 pumpers and a ladder in reserve. We have to call back. We have to call back an engine. We have to call back a ladder to protect the rest of the people in the city. And when we do that, we don't even run EMS calls unless they're cardiac arrests. That's how thin we are. But, when you look at our overtime budget, sure it's high, but a lot of it is because of fires. So we can call back people to backfill to protect the citizens of the city.
Do you have any stats for us today? It seems like on the news, there's been quite a few fires lately.
We can get them for you. There's no doubt about that, but peaks and valleys, folks.
How many firemen are we asking for?
Huh?
Are we asking to add any firemen? This,
No.
I didn't see any. Why not?
Well, we've done so much with so less, we're used to it, but I just want to commend the men and women of this department, all through this COVID, every day they came to work, and I know they were thinking about their health, more importantly, their family's health, bringing it back, changing clothes at the firehouse, taking a shower, but you got to be proud of those people. They never let anybody in this town down, and they're still doing the job.
I think we are.
Do you have any retirements coming up in 2022?
It's sporadic, maybe 3 or 4.
Chief, is it typical that the numbers you gave us for your, the number of staff you have now versus what you had in the past, is it typical other fire departments are the same situation?
Yes.
Is everybody down? And it's for the same reasons that we're down.
Yes. And another thing is, we have mutual aid agreements with the county. They need us as much as we need them sometimes. And their manpower is really hurting. I mean, it's a national epidemic. Everybody's feeling the pinch. And we're there for them and they're here for us.
Did we talk about, I'm sorry to interrupt. Did we talk about having a fee coming in to help if we needed to go out to them? If we were going to charge them a fee?
Oh, no,
Okay.
not at all. No, I mean, it's about life and property, and, like we had the big mattress fire, I'm sure there was at least 1 rig from every volunteer company in the county helping us out. They're still holding their own. but that mutual aid agreement is great.
And I believe too, chief, and correct me if I'm wrong, even if they don't go to the scene of the fire, they're on call to, in case something else were developed in the city, where you're at that bigger fire, they're there in case something else were to break out.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up. Right. They're on standby at their station, waiting for us to call them if we need them to backfill for us.
The first responder fee, that go anyplace?
Pardon?
The first responder fee, has that gone anyplace as far as, do we charge an insurance company or somebody if we're the first one on the scene?
No, the only thing we could charge councilmen is for false alarms,
Okay.
motor vehicle accidents, and when we go to a fire inside the city for rigs and equipment. And we're that close. I mean, you passed the ordinance for the false alarms, and we're just working out the legalities for the fires and the motor vehicle accidents. But it's being done throughout the state with career departments. It's just a matter of ironing it out and getting legal to, put the words in the right way, and we'll be good to go.
Gotcha.
But you know what? It's not going to be a big money maker. I'll be honest with you, Ever since you passed that ordinance, I've been keeping track more or less. People have really started to take care of their alarm systems, and good for them, but their maintenance is coming along. So those calls are going down and down and down. It's just like way back when they did that cigarette tax. It figured the state and the country bring in windfalls of money. Well, people quit smoking. So there you go. Same thing.
That worked, Bill. The ordinance worked.
Yeah, it did.
And I know you guys are going sometimes 4 or 5 times in a month to the same place.
Oh, yeah. Not anymore.
And your oxygen tanks and your other equipment that's necessary is all okay?
Right, yeah. We keep up with the maintenance. I mean, when we do get new rigs, when we got 2 in the last 3 years, when we order the fire truck or the ladder truck, it's all new equipment, because you don't want to take a 10-year-old chainsaw that's beat up and put on a brand new rig and hope it works. And the fire department's really changing a lot, from combustible engine fans and chainsaws to battery operated equipment, which makes it safer and easier to use. So, we're finally getting over the edge there.
Councilwoman, did you mean oxygen tanks or air tanks for a
Well-
self-contained breathing apparatus?
Things like that.
Yeah.
All in general, yes, I'm sorry.
Well, our self-contained breathing apparatus, we have that grant, and we ordered the new SCBA's. They won't be here till probably February, but that is, we got that $593,000 on a grant, and probably a couple meetings ago, you passed the purchase of that.
Yeah,
And
when I was here.
the extra money that was needed on top of that grant.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for them?
Only I'm surprised that we're looking at 2.5 million and finding that out today. I've been working hard for you guys.
Yeah.
If anybody can find the money though, the moisture can, right?
Well, we can put the ball in his court then, right?
Yeah.
You got it.
I know I've mentioned this before, but seriously, we should try to publicly address our situation so people can leave money for things like this in their wills. And, instead of buying a plant for someone, they could buy a truck, right? I mean, there should, like how the county has it. I know we have taxes and we pay our taxes, but there are people who may want to contribute for a truck or so. Yeah, just saying.
And we're open to anybody that wants to donate money. I mean, You know, we can always put the name on the side of a fire truck, you know, sell a door, you know, I mean,
We looked into that one year, remember?
Yeah, because it was actually a suggestion in one of those, either the 2005 financial management report or the 2021. I can't remember which one, but there was a suggestion that there be a community fund established by the city of Erie. So we did talk about it, Kathy. You're right.
Well, if we don't have anything else to say, thank you so much for your report and talking to us, and we'll have our police chief next. Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And for everybody that's leaving, thank you for your service. I know sitting up there is not one of the easiest things in the world, but you guys did a great job.
Just
Thank
keep
you.
it cool.
Without you guys, are
No fires.
things, really.
As your liaison, I'm very thankful for you and just am very blessed that we have such a great fire department for the city of Erie. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes.
Take care, guys. Deja vu here, huh?
This guy.
Yeah.
Sure, sure.
Hi, Donna. Hello, everyone.
Okay, we have three departments that we're gonna deal with the police department. Again, referencing the handout, we're gonna start on page 38, which is the Office of Police Civilians. And there was, in the handout book, we showed, page 38 in the budget book. And that is the department that does all the peripheral work for the police department. As you look at the bottom of your budget book page, it's the data entry people, the CSOs, just all the peripheral things that need to be done for the officers out in the street. This is the group that does that. And there have been 22 people in that department for ever. Quite a few years. It was a little more, but before we went to the 911 center, but so for the last dozen years or so, there have been 22 people. Their budget is only personnel expenses. So they have some overtime, they have some salaries, pension, group insurance and the like.
Minimal.
Well, $1,500. The next department is on page 39, and that is the police department, which after, we go through the numbers, I'm sure you may have one or two questions for the chief about that. The changes to the FTEs between last year's budget and this year's budget, we're up 23. 21 are going to be due to the ARP hiring. And then we have a couple grant reimbursements, the Pell grant, and there's the fraud grant also. So that's how you get to the FTE number there. The expenditures, there's very, very little change. Chief spending goes from about $425,000 to about $445,000. And most of it's in the consumable expenses they have. And also some of the supply line items, things they need to buy to do their job. And in the supplies, we list the chemicals and medical and lab supplies, and they're just a peripheral, all the things that they need to do their jobs, the expenses have gone up. So I know $20,000, it's about 4.5% increase, but they really haven't spent that much. And Liz, I think you're going for your button.
I am going
Okay.
for the button. Can we look at that overtime line item?
Yes.
Because I thought
Christine?
we were told that adding 21 or now 23 new officers would reduce overtime.
Well, that's or do you want to talk to that, chief?
All right, you're projecting that, and I think Paul and I disagree a little bit on this. I think that we have a potential of maybe $150,000 to $200,000. The overtime has many different facets. You have the court reimbursements, you have investigations, emergency call-ins, and then you have the manpower, the backfilling, to ensure that there is an adequate number of cars on the street at any time. That's the backbone of the department, 99 patrol officers. When those officers take time off or become sick, those are the 99 positions that have to be backfilled. I can't go out with 2 officers. If, you know, I have to make sure I have enough cars to respond to the calls. That portion, the backfill of the overtime account is what needs the so much money. By having the additional officers come in, particularly the 9 that fall under the crisis car, they will be in that patrol complement. That'll put 9 extra officers. That's 2 officers per shift, first, second, and third shift, 7 days a week. That's 2 extra bodies right there. So there won't be as much overtime needed because I'm adding 2 people to the detail. I believe that will reduce up to 200,000 in the overtime. That
As
is
long as they're not doing anything else.
right. Now,
Okay.
if they go to court and it's on a different shift, they're gonna get overtime. But they're not the detectives coming in to work major crimes and stuff like that. But just having those extra 2 bodies should prevent the OIC from having to call into it that time. I think it's gonna cut about 200,000 off of overtime.
As I mentioned at the last, when we had the ARP session, I still don't understand how this is going to be sustainable. And I asked the administration to show me how we're going to have that additional revenue in terms of LRTA, properties coming off of LRTA to pay for these officers after the ARP funding. You go back to 2005 when you use those figures to say, hey, we had this many. Well, 2005 is also coincides with, there was a reason, and I'm not saying it was justified that they were the ones laid off, but the city was in deep financial trouble. And I don't understand how we aren't setting ourselves up for another fall 4 years from now.
Well, one thing that we've talked about from the beginning, and I've talked to Paul, we know that it's gonna take months and months, almost half a year to get up to that number. In year 4 and year 5, we are planning, as of right now, that there will be attrition in years 4 and 5. We will not have all 21 officers for 5 years. He's already budgeted that the first year, half the year, we're not gonna have them here. In year 4, we're gonna start attrition. Year 5, we're gonna start attrition. As of right now, next year, I am looking at the retirement of 10 officers, okay? I'm hiring 7 of them in February, they're replacements. That's just in the first half of the year. I don't have anyone else scheduled from July to December retiring. Everybody's retiring between January and June. I've got 10 officers already lined up to go. So we will use, on average, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, we usually have 8 officers retire. It's like a standard turnover for the department. This year, I know next year we're looking at 10.
It's about 2 weeks before.
We have a few more years where we're going to start having more retirements. The department has shifted. In 2005, the last officer that had been hired that was laid off for 2.5 years. And then when he came back, we didn't hire still. There's a 5-year gap in the age of the department. And we are at that level right now where we've just moved from heavy, older people with 17 years or more. And this half of the department has 12 years or less. Very experienced. Okay, our guy right here, that guy that was the last layoff to come back, that 5-year mark, we're right here now. The department is even. But for the next 5 years, we're going to be seeing a lot of these older officers retire. The department's going to become younger. So we will have the numbers for attrition through year 4 and 5.
You'll have the numbers, but what about the steps? Well, no, let me just ask, when do you get to top scale on this, on the contract?
The beginning of your 6th year.
So you're thinking of attrition in terms of
Of-
total salary or numbers of people? That's what I'm unclear about. You're thinking that there's going to be attrition and you are not going to replace people? Or is it going to be attrition and you have people making less? Because it doesn't take all that long to get to top scale. So I'm confused. If you can just
It
clarify
takes
that.
six years to get to top scale, but the high end, the long-term officers are going to be retiring. We're not replacing those 21 bodies. We know going into this that this is ARP money. It's only available for 5 years. It's similar to what the military is called a surge. We are surging the department to put in extra officers, try to knock down the number of crimes. In the same time, we're also building the department up. We talk about the crisis car, and it would be great if I could start a crisis car, but I have to take these officers off the street to go train them. And if I take them off the street, now all of a sudden I'm paying overtime for them. So I'm trying to get the department up where we have juvenile detectives, crisis car, and a couple other officers on patrol. Get them up to where all that training's done, basically raise the level of the department's training to operate in all these facets. When we start losing the officers that retire at the end, we're going to be back to right where we are right now, 175 officers, 174.
So is that the answer to your?
Well, I guess with that being said though, too, how do we know in 5 years you may not need that higher complement of officers? I mean, maybe you will be saving money by having that higher complement of officers where you're having less overtime because they're in courts or what have you. I mean, I get the projected outlook, which I appreciate, and I know, that's your forte, not ours, but if it means keeping the more police officers on and the systems working in year 1 through 5, then we may not want it.
Well, and here's something else to consider is that just in the past 2 years, we've added 2 officers because we've went out and actively sought grants. Actually, a 3rd employee is a civilian who's doing our crime analyst work that we got a grant for. We've went out and found 3 grants in the last 2 years and hired these 3 people. Now that we know how to do it, now that the city has Abby Skinner, and you've heard her name over and over, she's fantastic at what she does. We are bringing in more money than we've had before. I've got a breakdown here. We talked about it briefly in the ARP presentation, but I'll go into it a little bit more detail. In overtime, and first off, I want to let you know that with our last reimbursement from the government, we have not gone over budget now in 4 years. We've made our budget. In overtime money, and again, remember I talked about, we have all kinds of different task forces and programs that the officers work in addition. And, you know, the Erie County Drug and Alcohol Grant brought in $250,000 as of October 31st. This is just as of the third quarter report. Highway safety, we're bringing in $7,000. Gun violence reduction was $60,000. Marshals, you know, $10,000. Extra patrols for requests from citizens, 10, 13,000 there. Our burn grant's going to be over 100,000 a year for the next 3 years. The workers, the drug task forces and stuff, 360,000 in 3 quarters just for overtime. Then with these grants, the insurance fraud prevention, the auto theft, our PAL supervisor and the civilian analyst, that was 509,000 in salary and benefits. And then there's another $500,000 that we brought in grants.
Where's the money, chief?
We use it. We use it. But what did I say? 1.3 million. If we can do that every year or get better at it, some of those positions in 5 years, we may be able to do. The crisis car, the human resources budgets of all those agencies that came in and spoke, OCY, crisis service, UPMC, behavioral health. Okay, their budgets too, as we develop this program over the next few years, they may have money available through state reimbursements to them that we can use to fund the police response with them. Everybody says, hey, we want civilians to go and do this. Well, you heard from them, they want police there with them. Well, there's money there. We just haven't figured out how to put all the pieces together in order to get those grants. But I think that in the next 5 years, with the way we are going, we're on the right track, that we're going to have more grants and reimbursements from these places that will be able to keep some of these officers.
One of the questions I asked after the ARP presentation was when Daryl Craig spoke, I said, well, who's not at the table? Who should we hear from? And he said the school district. So I think it would have been helpful to know what the school district is doing in terms of adding, you know, they decided not to cut back on the police force there. I think I was kind of hoping that maybe somebody would follow up on that suggestion. Has anybody followed up on my question and Daryl Craig's recommendation that the school district should be here talking about this too?
I've talked to Superintendent Polito. We actually go back a long time. They're in the process with their school board of redeveloping their entire police operations at the school. So we are going to look at next year as they develop what they want to do, how we're going to fit in, how our juvenile detectives are going to work together with the school district. That's all stuff that we're working on right now.
I'm going to ask the other question I used to ask just about every week and still never got an answer to, and I made a big plea about it last time. Anything new on vaccination rates or getting people to step up? Remember, there was a lot of positive buzz about how our public safety people really helped in the masking. What about the vaccinations? What's the rate now in the police department? And is anybody jumping forward to say we're going to be a lead agency on getting people vaccinated?
Well, I can say that we're encouraging, even the union bosses are agreeing. They're trying to get everybody. We did go up from 52 to 54% vaccinated. On the other hand, and I know this isn't what we want to hear, but that accounts for 108 of my employees. I have 200 total, including the civilians. So that's 108 vaccinated. There's 64 that have had COVID. okay? Plus another 10 who had the vaccination, yet still got COVID. Take those 10 out. So we're only at 64 with antibodies. And some of the people say, I have the antibodies, I don't want to go get my shots until they tell me 6 months out later. So some of those, again, it's not what you want to hear, but I'm just telling you what they're telling me.
Ooh, they must be listening to that congresswoman who was on Fox News the other day talking about antibodies. And then like later that night, she was on CNN urging people to get vaccinated. So two different messages. It would be good if we had the Erie County Health Department coming in and talking about the protection you get from vaccination versus the antibodies because you've had COVID.
You're speaking to the choir here, agree 100%. I've told my officers from the beginning, I was one of the first people in line to get vaccinated. I've encouraged it the entire time. I can tell you though, the 54% vaccinated plus the 32% that have antibodies, it's not the same, but really we're at 86% within the department. And, you know, I monitor it. I can tell you exactly how many. We've again had 10 people vaccinated that ended up catching it, but none of them were as serious as some of the others. So I put this out regularly to the department, and we're doing all we can to encourage the COVID vaccination.
Kathy, let me ask a question. Chief, you said the new hires are coming in February?
We have eight employees we were going to hire in February. All of them are replacing either people that retired this year or are retiring in the beginning of next year.
So what I'm trying to find out is, we talked about our 5-year plan to clean up the streets. Well, the first batch of officers aren't going to help get that plan moving?
Those additional officers, we will not be ready to hire them till May.
Might be a real good idea, Liz mentioned, about getting the school district together, because we need help on the streets. We're getting 14, 13-year-old kids shot every other night.
We had a car chase last night with a stolen car, and when they got it, they pulled the driver out. He was 14 years old.
That's my case, yeah. I know you're doing a heck of a job, again, like the fire department, with less than you'd like to have. But we've got to talk results. I mean, it's getting to the point where people are afraid to walk down the street in their neighborhood. And that's not right. Thank you, though.
Chief, can I ask one more question? The new development, the FBI task force that's going to be in our town, that should actually help save us some dollars in the budget. They prosecute them, or it's still going to be our locals that would have to be at those court hearings, I guess is my question.
Our officers will be working on the task force. Their time on the task force will be paid by the federal government. So that'll be covered. It should go through the federal system. It should be of no cost to us.
So bottom line is, though, it should help the budget with overtime and even, wouldn't you think, in a roundabout way, or no? Or I'm just.
Ideally, we'd like to say yes, but knowing the number of drug complaints and drug houses, the task force is going to be operating on targeting the high level. Maybe we knock some of them off. Usually the underlings will go find another supplier. We never
Might just weed them out of the city a little bit though, too. Or,
we could try that.
I mean, I'm just wishful thinking maybe, and maybe that'll help the number. Maybe not this year, maybe in the next year, but I'm just, I could think of a little.
Now, it's probably not a good thing to bring this up during budget session, but I'm going to mention, first off, thank you. Earlier this year, you wrote letters in support of the radar guns. We're still the last state, that- been waiting 30 years since I've been on the job to get them. We still don't have them. But I want to take, not that they're going to be a revenue, they'll generate some ticket money, but it's nothing. Some people are worried that we're going to use radar to plug budget holes. We're not going to be out there writing tickets, 24 hours a day and stuff. But something to understand and to remember is when I started this job 31 years ago, if I saw you go through a red light and I pulled you over and wrote you a ticket, that ticket was about $50. Okay. And out of that $50, 25 is the state fine. Okay. We get half of the state fine. So $12.50, 31 years ago when you went through a red light. Today, if you go through a red light, I'll have one of the young officers stop you and write you. But that ticket will now be approximately $150. Guess how much the city of Erie gets per ticket still? $12.50. 31 years, that ticket gone from 50 to 150. The state's got all kinds of extra costs for all these things. But the municipalities that have to take the time to write the tickets and do all the work are not getting a single cent more.
Why isn't there any power in the city or the city council to, and I'll just throw a number up that 175, so the city at least gets 3750.
Well, that's set by the state legislature. So I guess my point to this is, I don't know that the state legislature's heard from anybody in the last 30 years, but it's fallen on deaf ears because we have a department that's, the cost of running a car, the cost of the officer has gone up so much. But the amount of money coming to write that ticket is still $12.50.
So, in other words, you let the car go through because it'll save the city money most likely. I'm just saying. That's what it sounds like to me.
I didn't mean to say it that way. No, I prefer to say that possibly as a voice, city council, was gracious enough to talk about the radar bill, that maybe that's something that, should be explored is, hey, how come the communities, and it's not just Erie, I mean, it's every community across Pennsylvania is still getting $12.50.
Chief, I did read that I think it is, I don't know if I have the name right, Pennsylvania Chiefs Association or Chief, whatever. And I think also the State District Attorneys Association was opposed to that legislation, which Governor Wolf, I believe, is going to veto it anyhow, but about the, no permit carry. Is that something city council should weigh in on? And I realize it's kind of a political question, but I read it in a story that those two groups were opposed to it, but I didn't go to their actual sites to verify that. But would that, we talk about, ghost guns and all kinds of stuff, and it alarms me, but I just wondered, is that something that we would speak up
understanding,
on, or what? I don't know. I don't want to speak for the Chief of Police Association, but it sounded like they were concerned about that.
I'm aware of it. I agree with them. What I've been told is that the governor's veto should stand, that there are not enough votes to overturn the veto. And as long as that stays true, then that's a good thing. There's no reason that we'd want to get rid of permitting the concealed carry of a firearm.
And I just wanted to go back to, since we have you here, two things that we did, like since I've been on council. One was the aggressive panhandling, and then we decriminalized the small, possession of marijuana. Do you know how those two things panned out? I mean, have there been very many aggressive panhandling citations issued? and I mean, two separate things, but they kind of stood out in my mind that, council did this thinking we were doing a good thing, but I don't know how those two things have worked out.
I know that last year we had a lot more complaints about aggressive panhandling. And we did use some of the SatNet officers to go out and actually make contact with these people. And we looked at it as a mental health, homeless, human services thing. Why are you here? What's going on? Sergeant Russo actually has a pretty good log of all the people they made contact with and why they were there. I haven't heard a lot of complaints about aggressive panhandling since, so I assume that's good. As far as the small amount of marijuana, I haven't heard any issues or problems or complaints.
But have we issued citations, do you think, for that, or as opposed to? I think the last time, remember when I talked to one of the Nolans and he said it was kind of hard to track data on that, but I just
Right.
wonder, I mean, is it working that we're saying you're gonna pay a tick, a fine instead of?
Well, having
whatever.
that option is something that the officers can do. It would save some court time and stuff. The issue is whether or not they had something else on them. If that's all it is, honestly, most of the officers aren't bothered over a small, tiny little bit of weed. It's more paperwork than it's worth. The problem is if they have that and they're caught up with something bigger, it's all going on to the state arrest.
Chief, I have a traffic question again. The Bayfront, one of the biggest things that you hear is that people are traveling too fast. Right? In my travels lately, Ohio, Michigan, places like that, I've seen posted signs on the road saying 0 tolerance area. Would we be permitted to put those up and maybe do a blitzkrieg for a week or two to let them know we're telling them?
I'd have to look at the PennDOT and stuff. One of the things that we just talked to Paul about was we already have a trailer that has a speed limit is this, your speed is, it has the radars. When you go by, we put that out across the city in different places. We are getting another sign. We realized this back when they were taking the bridge down on 12th Street. We really didn't have a way to communicate future roads closed, or if a road's closed for emergency or a fire. We're buying one of those large signs that we'd call PennDOT to bring in, except they'd be like, well, it's in use. We can't get it to you. So we're buying one of our own signs like that. We're going to try to figure out how to use that in cooperation with the motorcycle unit to slow people down.
If people know that it's a 0 tolerance area and they're gonna get nailed if they go 5 or 10 over, that's an awareness that they'll start looking. Hey, I've seen people go by those damn signs to see how fast they can make the numbers go up. Because they know nobody's there to stop them from doing it anyway.
Yeah.
It is a deterrent. When it's on Cherry Street, you can see people slowing down when they go. But I didn't know if PennDOT was responsible for putting the sign up, but that 0 tolerance, they're just great yellow signs with black letters, and it caught your attention. 0 tolerance area, and people,
Yeah.
you could see them go.
That'd be great, especially if we had the radars, would make it much easier.
There you go. Thank you.
Chief Dan, when you were talking about like OCY and the different social agencies that want more police officers, and we talked about training, can you expand upon the training a little bit? Will it just be a select group of officers that will be trained to work with the social service agencies, or will all the officers be trained?
Okay, our department right now, in our regular department training, we bring those agencies in and they may do anything from a 1 hour to a 4 hour presentation. Everybody gets it. What we are looking at with this group though, this crisis car, these 9 officers, we are still trying to design what exact training that'll be. It'll be much more in depth than what we do for the department. And then our goal is to have them working on the street, and the officers will learn from them, because they'll come and it happened to me young in my career, where the crisis car would show up on a call and say, hey, go handle your next call. We've got this. And then you stay there until you get a call, because you watch them and you see how they do it. By having these specially trained officers, you can't put the whole department through that intensive training. You need specialists in areas, and that'll help the whole.
Are the officers who want to be on the force, they go through a psychological evaluation and make sure that they're like level-headed, okay?
There's a psychologist that interviews everyone and does a report on them. Yes. That's part of the process, why it takes so long. The background checks that we have to do. A lot of the guys and girls that come out of the military, just putting in a request to get records from the military, sometimes it takes 3 or 4 months to get those records in. So, you know, our inspector and internal affairs unit is, you know, as soon as that list came out in September, immediately started putting out those letters so that they could get as much information back.
Majority of the guys come with their certifications already though.
We're very fortunate. Plus, our civil service ordinance is that in order for us to hire you, you have to be 120 certified. That means you went to the school, the police academy school, and you can, but then there's a final test they take to make sure that they are ready to be a municipal officer. With us, because we're a career department, we take a lot of other officers from other police departments and bring them here. So they bring some of that experience already.
And Chief, I think Lori Pickens left and she has a new job, but has that position been filled? And I don't even know, does that person report in your department or somewhere else, the community? Is it a community policing?
It's the
Position or-
Byrne grant,
Right,
but it's run through economic development. So
Okay.
Deb Smith, actually, she reported to. Honestly, I forgot. I haven't asked Deb where they are in reposting that position.
okay, because I think that there's a draft report that actually was given out at like a neighborhood watch meeting, so I wasn't sure. Has that come to you then, or is that going through it, revisions or redrafting, or Deb would be the one to ask about that?
Deb would know more about that.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any other questions for them?
I do have one question, Chief. In the past year and a half, I asked just the locker area for the policemen. Has that been upgraded yet? Is there any of that in the budget yet, Paul, or?
We're working on it.
I did personally tour that, and it really made me sad. Like, we really need to build up their self-esteem with a nice place, because it was pretty gross.
As we get to the end of the year, we always look at what's left and what's available in the capital budget. And I was going to talk to the chief and Chief Walco in the next few days over, how the little pittance that we still have left and what either of them could use that money for. So.
All right, thanks for keeping it.
Thank you, Chief Dan, for your commitment to the city of Erie, for your untiring presence. We are very thankful. Thank you, Paul, for the budget session, and Christine. Do you have anything else to say?
Well,
Tomorrow,
we're going to talk we're not going to have a finance committee meeting. And it's the first of the month. I mean, I can print out tomorrow morning November numbers that are going to be really weak. because the deposits are still probably a week behind. And with Thanksgiving, the treasurer's office is.
But you always have an excuse not to have current numbers, but that's okay. It's
Where are you
okay.
telling,
I'm here.
seriously? Okay,
It's Thanksgiving, I know.
yeah, I mean,
You're doing a good job, Paul.
I could go to the treasurer's office right now and do their job for them.
All good.
So what we're going to do is, instead of a budget, or instead of the finance meeting, after the meeting tomorrow, start deliberating between us of talking about the budget. Is that all right, colleagues?
Wherever you want.
I would agree that it could be public because it's public. So yes, out here is better than in a small caucus room.
Frank's
Yes.
gonna- I think somebody told Frank to make sure these are cleared out for the meeting. Maybe we should hold a regular meeting in this kind of format too. Because you're not gonna move all these out and then move them back in. Right? I mean, whatever you guys want to do. Go to your-
Well, we can still be on the dais and come down afterwards. Keep these tables the way they are.
Oh, all right.
Although we will need our microphones actually, right? Frank, are you available to talk to us for?
Where is it? Oh, there.
Thank you, Mrs.
think, Frank?
Do it. Good job.
Right. Thank you, Mayor Joe. Do you have anything to say?
I would just thank you all for all the work you're doing and listening and thinking through the budget, and we'll continue to work with you for as long as it takes. Thanks very much.
Kathy, thank you.
We can conclude this session then. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.